Are you a new game master who's a little nervous about running your first game? Are you an experienced game master who wants to improve with new insights and fresh thinking? Well, guess what? We're here to help you with a tabletop tune-up. All right, my name is Ben Dyer, and I'm here with my co-host.
Hey, my name is Mark Lehman.
And this is the Tabletop Tune Up podcast, where we're going to be giving you tips and ideas from our experience as game masters. So let's get right to it. This is a podcast for GMs of any game. D&D is obviously popular. We'll talk about that. But we also wanted to welcome and explore other kinds of games as well, games that have other kinds of expectations, different settings, different tropes. Sometimes it can be pretty scary to go into these other games that maybe you haven't tried out before. But before we get into that, Mark, my question for you is, what exactly is a GM? What is it that the GM does?
So many things. Many times it's crying after a session.
I've done that once or twice.
I think, when we're talking about GMing, there's three elements to a good role-playing game. And we talk about the three. Let's just start with the GM, because the game master is one of the three elements. And that's what we're here for. We're here for the GM. GMs are many things. We're running the game. We're taking care of the plot. We're taking care of like the antagonists, NPCs, creating these worlds which the players are going to be, hopefully having fun in and excitement. Basically building the stage for them to have these performances and have these kind of like adventures. And we're kind of in charge of all that. But as you know, there's a lot more roles to just that than a GM, right?
Yeah, we do wear a lot of hats. So some of them, like you say, are creative. They have to do with world building and characters and all those things. Other parts are essentially social. So they're the parts to do with facilitating gameplay during the game, interpreting rules, and so on. And I think also that social quality goes a little bit further. It even includes leadership. It includes, you're typically the person as the GM who's organizing a session, who's dealing with any kind of social drama or needs or whatever outside of the game itself. You're often speaking on behalf of the group if you guys need to make an adjustment. And it's really, I think of it a lot the way that I think about directors are to movies. You're the person that everybody looks to make those key decisions.
Yeah, those leadership qualities are kind of inherent in the role too. It's not necessarily like you take up the mantle of the GM and you're thinking you're just going to be running this adventure in this story all the time. And then all of a sudden you find out you're kind of thrust into this role of a leader, and you kind of have to be a little bit ready for that. You can't just pretend like that's not part of the job.
Yeah. If you're shy, it might help you to know that this is what people want from you. And so you do need to kind of step up into that role and show some confidence and really just get in there, because they're going to follow you.
What are the different names for GMs or dungeon masters
Well, so yeah, if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, it's going to be a dungeon master, but then other kinds of games don't have dungeons. So I know I've heard referee, I've heard game master, which is kind of a slight paraphrase of that term.
You got storyteller.
Storyteller, yep. That's for our friends playing White Wolf games. I remember way back, this sounded very ominous, but way back playing the Marvel game from the 80s or 90s, it was the judge.
Was it really?
It was the judge.
That sounds horrible.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different terms, but they all kind of do the same thing. But that's one of our three pillars here. So let's talk about the next one. And the next one is the players. So Mark, being a player is a lot of fun. We all know that. But there's more to it than just getting in there to throw some dice in anger and see if you can clobber the next bad guy and loot the next dungeon, right? What else is going on if you're a player?
But I'm still thinking about that judge thing. I haven't even tried to wrap my head around that first. Okay, players. There's a lot of responsibility in players. They're obviously in charge of a character, typically a single character. There are some games which you might run multiple ones, but let's just assume for this conversation that they're in charge of a character, but they're also kind of like, there's a kind of a social contract there, isn't there? Like
Yeah.
they kind of have to play within the bounds of the people around them and give their friends agency. Their character has to have agency. There's a lot going on the player side. And it might seem at a glance that, oh, we're just playing, we're playing a game, but you're kind of entering into a bit of a social contract with those people around you that you're not going to be a jackass.
Yeah. One of the things I think is really interesting about being a player is that there's no such thing in an RPG party as the lead character. This is one of these things that it takes you a minute to kind of realize, but you're a part of an ensemble and everybody needs screen time. Everybody's thinking of their character as important. And some of the best games that you'll ever play are the ones that you play with people who both want to have their moment, but then they also want to set your moment up. And I think that's a part of that social contract you're talking about, where players really contribute to the success of each other. And they also want to contribute to the success of the story as a story. And those are some of my favorite games.
I agree. Those are the games that, my wife gets to hear about after my sessions. And painfully, I'm sure she nods her head and she pretends like she enjoys my game stories. But,
How long have you been married now? It's long enough that she knows this came with the deal. This was a part of it.
This was the better or worse. I think this might, my game stories might be the worse.
In crits and in TPKs, was that part of the vows?
Yeah, that was definitely part of it. And let's talk about crits.
I think I know who this third pillar is. I think we've spent money on them. We've cursed them. We've put them in jail. We've occasionally lavished praise on them. Mark, it's time to talk about the dice.
Yeah, the dice. We're not just talking about just dice. The dice are, we're talking about the system that you're choosing to play, the rules to which you're kind of, as a group, have bound yourselves to. The dice are kind of like the representation of that system, right? So when we're talking about dice, the dice kind of have their own story to tell. And they are like the honey badger. They don't care about your story. They don't care about the GM story. They kind of have their own little story one to tell. And it's usually, it could be great. It could be wonderful. It could be humiliation.
How many times have you ever gone into a combat or into a conflict situation in your game and you say the amazing zinger that should be persuasive and you roll a 1? Or you say, I draw my sword. You get this really great, amazing description and you roll a 1. And your character just ends up with his face in the mud.
Those are humbling moments. But, we kind of look at those at the time. Oftentimes we kind of look back we look at those moments in the moment. We're like, oh, we get, kind of upset and our hands go up. But I think in memory, those are some of the funnest moments we have at the table.
I think there's probably a whole podcast to be had on what do you do when your players get defeated? And some of that's about recovery and having some skills there. But frankly, I completely agree with you. I think some of my favorite moments are moments where I'll give you an example. I was in a campaign where my character was captured by his arch nemesis. And we spent, I think, maybe 2 or 3 sessions where I was trying to work my way up out of that hole again. But by the time I did, it was the most satisfying thing ever to have clawed up from the pit of despair and finally overcome them, defeat the enemy. So I think defeat is defining. And I think that those setbacks that we have make the critical successes all the sweeter.
Yeah, they certainly do. We kind of talk about great characters who kind of failed and how fun and lovable they can be. I think of the movie Big Trouble in Little China.
Classic.
And old Jack Burton. Jack, he's a lot of talk, isn't he?
Oh, he sure is. He likes to run his mouth.
Yeah, he's a tough guy. He likes to talk. And you got to keep in context of the era he grew up in with the big muscly Arnold Schwarzeneggers and
That's right.
Sylvester Stallones and all these really tough guys.
So for those of you that don't know, this is a reference to a John Carpenter movie. It comes out in the mid-'80s with Kurt Russell in the title role of Jack Burton.
Yeah, go watch it if you haven't.
Great movie.
Do your homework. Jack, you're kind of getting up to the big tentpole fight scene in the movie, and Jack Burton walks into the room, says something really macho, pulls out his gun and sends a warning shot into the roof. which knocks out a ceiling tile, which lands on his head. Jack is unconscious, laying on the ground for that entire battle scene.
I'm certain I have rolled that roll on the dice at least once or twice in my career.
Anybody who's played a tabletop game looks at Jack Burton and goes, I've been there.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I've been there.
We've been there. And it's fun. And we love that character. And that's part of why we love him. And I think players, we're getting really sidetracked, but the idea is that players have that responsibility, and the dice have that responsibility to also tell their story.
So the players have a responsibility to be part of an ensemble.
Yes.
And the dice and the medium have a responsibility to introduce just enough uncertainty that we never quite know where that game is going to go.
Yeah, and going back to kind of the role of the GM has to be kind of aware of these dynamics. The players don't. As a game master, you need to be aware of the dice dynamics, the player dynamics, and you want to encourage the best out of your players. You want to encourage the best out of your dice. And you want them to have that, the players to have that space which they can kind of explore these moments. And that's really one of the big challenges of GMing.
Well, we're going to talk about that challenge and a lot of other ones in the weeks to come. Obviously, though, it sounds like this could be a lot of work, a lot of effort. Mark, what's the upside here, man? You're describing something that has a degree of difficulty to it. Why would anybody do this? What is the upside?
Oh, the upside is magic, Ben. It really is. Like, there's something magical about being a part of a game group and running a game. There's nothing like it. You know, being able to tell stories collectively is such a unique thing, and it's such a gift to be able to kind of be with your friends, and all together you're telling some amazing story.
Being able to elicit that experience out of others and to help them create a great story. One of the things I know we've talked about from time to time is how it's really a kind of a servant's discipline, right? What we're really doing here is we're trying to help other people be their best. When they do, because we've given them that platform in the world and in the system, it's really kind of magical, and it's like nothing else.
Ben, I got a question for you though. Yeah, as we kind of go forward, what kind of podcast are you hoping this to be? Like, what do you want to see? What kind of things do you want to do on this podcast?
Well, in the coming weeks, I'm hoping that we talk about things like rituals that we have as GMs to set the mood in the game. I'm thinking about things like player agency. I'm thinking about things like time management, how to really create a world that sings for the players. Maybe how to set mood. If you've ever played like a scary game, how to get the hairs on the back of people's necks to rise. There's all kinds of great things to do here. But if you think about those earlier parts where we were talking about how there's a social component, there's a creative component, I think all of that is stuff we want to talk about here on the Tabletop Tune Up.
Those sound like fun topics. I definitely want to jump into a lot of those. I want to also talk about things like how to use AI tools effectively, min-maxing, how to use comedy in your games effectively. There's so many things that we could be talking about, and questions that I always had, when I was trying to run games. These are things you and I, Ben, have failed at and succeeded at over the course of, 30 years of playing games and running games.
Oh yeah. There is very little that you're going to hear on this podcast that doesn't come from deep scar tissue. All the times we got it wrong. And that's actually something that I hope that the people who are listening to the podcast really can take away from this is that, maybe being a GM might sound a little bit intimidating the first time you kind of see the job description, but it's trial and error, it's experience, it's really fun.
You're with your friends, and we're hoping that that's, a safe space for you to kind of have those missteps, but the reward just absolutely outweighs any mistakes you'll ever make. And you know that. Players will be talking about these games for years to come.
That's right. We're still talking about games that we played here many years later. The good ones and the bad ones. The ones that were epic and the ones that died after maybe just one session.
So our real goal here with this podcast is to help you out so you don't make the mistakes we did. We want to tune up your games. We want to make them better. So I hope you turn in every week, and we'll do our best to bring some good stuff for you.
That's fantastic. So we'll see you again soon. And until next time, keep those dice rolling.
Tune up, level up your fun. Tune up. progress has now begun. Tune Up will show you how it's done.